I just had somebody tell me that we don't know why people who have connective tissue disorders like EDS go on to develop histamine intolerance or mast cell activation syndrome, and why those people go on to develop POTS or dysautonomia. Beg my finest pardon. Like, we absolutely know why that happens, and I can explain it to you. Hi, if you don't know who I am, my name is Dr. Caitlin Hubbard. I have a PhD in cellular and molecular nutrition, and I'm also an herbalist. There's a whole spiel. I won't bother you with it. So people with connective tissue disorders, their connective tissue isn't as stable as normal people, right? Connective tissue, I know it sounds kind of like a complex term, but it essentially just means like the tissue that sits in between cells. It actually like lines blood vessels. It lines the intestines. It lines your axons on your nerves. And it is essentially going to act as support structures, so everything kind of like stays in place. But it's also going to help maintain continuous barriers. Now, in people with connective tissue disorders, this connective tissue is like dysfunctional. It just doesn't work real well, right? It's not really strong. So it's going to break down a lot easier. Now, in places just like in the extracellular space, right? It might not even break down. It might just like flex and bend or stretch, because if you haven't noticed, people's skin when they have EDS, it's very stretchy. Now, inside of this space, that's where mast cells live. Mast cells are these cells that are kind of like alarm systems. And when they sense something's wrong, either chemically or physically, they're going to release histamine and prostaglandins. So in the extracellular space, if that cellular connective tissue breaks down, or if it just flexes, or if it bends or it stretches, right? These mast cells are going to think, oh no, something's wrong, and they're going to release histamine. When that happens, it's going to draw more fluid to the area, and it's going to add more physical weight to the connective tissue that's already not really strong. And it's also going to import these things called cytokines that are inflammatory, and they're going to actually continue to push inflammation. Now, connective tissue surrounds blood vessels, and when we see that the connective tissue around blood vessels gets broken down, these blood vessels get leaky. And when they get leaky, the fluid that's supposed to stay in the blood vessel kind of pushes out past the blood vessel, and then we see swelling. Connective tissue is supposed to surround your intestinal tract and make sure you don't have leaky gut. But when the connective tissue that surrounds your intestinal barrier breaks down, then you're going to have histamine from your food get through, but you're also going to have undigested food proteins that are going to get through. And even if those are low histamine, they're still going to trigger the mast cells in that area to release histamine, because they shouldn't be there. And when those cells release histamine, it's going to further make the gut leaky. It's also going to increase like systemic inflammation levels, right? Finally, the coup de grace of the whole thing is that the axons on your nerves, so your nerves are kind of like electrical wiring in your house, and you've got like electrical outlets like your cell bodies and your synapses, right? But like in between that, you've got a really long segment of this thing called an axon. The axon is just there to like propagate the signal. It's just going to carry it, right? Connective tissue has to surround that to insulate it and also support the nerves up. So when that connective tissue is faulty, it causes the nerves to fire way easier than they should, which essentially keeps you in this like heightened threat response, which activates your mast cells to release histamine. So connective tissue, these people they have a very high risk of developing histamine intolerance and MCAS, especially if they don't know what to do to support their connective tissue disorder so that they don't develop MCAS, or they don't know how like their specific version of histamine intolerance and MCAS needs treated because they have collagen issues, right? Now, how does it develop to POTS? So when the connective tissue disorders and the histamine work together, they destabilize your blood vessels from being able to contract and expand when they need to. They're also going to let a lot of fluid through. This is going to contribute to not being able to vasodilate or vasocontract your blood vessels when you're supposed to, which is part of what causes people getting dizzy or passing out when they stand up. When connective tissue disorders happen in the intestines, right, you have all these undigested food particles coming in, you have all this histamine coming in, it causes a lot of systemic inflammation. When systemic inflammation, lots of histamine, and connective tissue disorders, right, work together, all three, you develop loss of vagal tone. Essentially just meaning that your peripheral nervous system just can't regulate really well. It can't function really well, right? You've lost your coordination and you're kind of always stuck in this like fight or flight mode. It's this loss of like vagal tone and vagal coordination that causes the symptoms of POTS. And this is why it's really difficult to treat it when you don't understand that the underlying issue is you have to support the connective tissue, right? And you have to deal with the histamine issues while you're also dealing with the POTS symptoms, because you have to treat the root cause or it's never going to get better. You're just going to keep putting band-aids on it. So I apologize if that is like new information and I have just been sitting on it. I genuinely thought like everybody kind of understood that, like, yeah, that's how people develop POTS. And it's because of connective tissue disorders and histamine intolerance and MCAS. That's why we see them together all the time. Like, it's not a coincidence. It's because they're directly related. So it's my bad. I can do it. Treating all of them are really complex. It would take me like 10 hours to teach you how to do it, but I can do like a really quick 10-minute video if anybody's interested on just like really fast ways that you can kind of start to get things under control. But yeah, they're not like connected. They don't just like show up in people together for fun. Like, they're actually connected.